أهلا بكم مشاهدينا الكرام، أنا طاهر بركي أحييكم وأقدم إليكم سلسلة جديدة من برنامجكم الذاكرة السياسية. معنا في هذه السلسلة محمد عمر داوودزي وزير الداخلية الأفغاني الأسبق. أهلا بكم معنا معالي الوزير، في الواقع وزير الداخلية الأسبق والعديد من المناصب الأخرى نتحدث عنها في سياق هذه الحلقات منذ انهيار نظام طالبان إلى عودة نظام طالبان طول 20 سنة الماضية، ونبدأ بالأسباب التي تعزو إليها انهيار نظام طالبان في 2001. هل فعلا لو سلم الملا عمر بن لادن لما كانت أمريكا اجتاحت أفغانستان؟ وما هو دليلك على ذلك؟
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Thank you, my brother Tahir. Yes, I believe that the Americans would not have invaded if Mullah Omar handed over Osama bin Laden for justice in America. That's what he was wanted for. And my reason is that had that happened, that they have handed him over, practically Taliban would have become ally of the United States in the war on Al-Qaeda. So allies obviously will not invade. Moreover, before the 9/11 attack, there was a meeting in Islamabad. A U.S. Congress delegation was visiting, and I was attending that meeting as representatives of the United Nations. And there I was seeing that Taliban had a very soft corner to the Taliban. And they were saying they have stopped poppy cultivation. They have got rid of warlords, they are wiping out factions. So they were more hopeful that Taliban will do good things in the area of human rights also, which would mean that the US would have recognized Taliban officially. But then the 9/11 attacks happened a month later, and Mullah Omar refused to hand over Osama bin Laden, and the US invaded Afghanistan.
معالي الوزير، هل كان لدى الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية خطة واضحة قبل الغزو لأفغانستان في 2001؟ هل صحيح أنه كان لديها نوايا لبلقنة أفغانستان لتقسيمها، وما الذي حال لاحقا دون ذلك؟
No, they didn't have a clear plan. It happened incidentally. It was an accident. And the U.S. Had orders from their boss, the U.S. Army and Special Forces, and they invaded the country. They arrived in small groups. They mobilized the factions of the Northern Alliance in the north of Afghanistan, and they mobilized two Pashtun leaders, Hamid Karzai in southwest and Abdul Haq in southeast. Abdul Haq was killed and Hamid Karzai survived, and he became the president.
في موضوع الترتيبات التي كانت الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية تحضر فيها مع الأفغان، هناك حديث حضرته مع إمام علي رحمان، مع الرئيس حامد كرزاي، ومع فهيم خان السياسي الأفغاني الكبير الراحل. ما هي هذه الترتيبات التي يمكن الحديث عنها في هذا السياق؟
Throughout the first 10 years of the presence of the US, often Fahim Khan, who was the vice president, he claimed that he had reversed the plan of balkanization of Afghanistan. And he was telling a story that he was called in for an urgent meeting by President Imam Ali Rahman. He conveyed to him that he has received a call from President Putin, who in turn had received a call from President Bush, asking the Northern Alliance forces, by then under the command of Fahim Khan, not to cross over to the south, remain to the north of Hindu Kush, which Fahim Khan was claiming that he sensed that maybe they want a separate arrangements in the south. And he refused, and he crossed over to the south and took over Kabul, while Hamid Karzai took over Kandahar. Mullah Omar surrendered to him in Kandahar, and then there was the Bonn arrangement. In 2010, I mean 10 years later, there was a dinner informal meeting which the two presidents, President Hamid Karzai, President Imam Ali Rahman, Vice President Fahim Khan, and me as Chief of Staff of the President, were present there. And President Karzai asked Imam Ali Rahman that how much truth was in that. And he recited the story exactly as we had heard from Fahim Khan.
كيف نفهم دخول بوتين على الخط آنذاك ليوصل رسالة من الأمريكيين إلى الأفغان.
In those days, Putin had declared to be an ally of the US in the war against terrorism. He gave them a base in Uzbekistan. The Manas base was given to Americans. In fact, the first American special forces that crossed over to Afghanistan landed in Uzbekistan, in Manas, and Manas was under control of Russia. So Russia was an ally of the US war against terror. Now, was Russia part of that plan of balkanization? I have no idea. But to complete the story, in 2007, when I visited Camp David along with President Kerzi, there was an aide of President Bush who took us around, and they took us to one room where a meeting took place on how to invade Afghanistan, how to send troops to Afghanistan to extract Osama bin Laden and to topple Taliban regime. And he told us the whole story. Now, I took the opportunity to ask him that was there any plan to balkanize Afghanistan? He flatly rejected. He said there wasn't anything like that on the table. We only wanted to extract Osama bin Laden and to punish Taliban for refusal to hand him over.
ولكن يعني للأسف عاد وظل بن لادن هاربا ل10 سنوات أخرى قبل أن يقتل، ومن ثم عادت طالبان إلى الحكم بعد 20 عاما. ربما نتطرق إلى بعض أسباب ذلك في سياق هذه الحلقات. هذه الغرفة التي تحدثت عنها هي نفس الغرفة التي اتخذ فيها قرار دخول الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية في الحرب العالمية الثانية، ويعني كانت زيارة مهمة جدا سنعود إليها بعد قليل. ولكن كيف اختار الأمريكيون كرزاي ليكون رئيسا لأفغانستان؟ متى بدأت القصة؟
Well, the story begins in October 6th, or rather in the month of October. I don't recall the exact date. Like I said earlier, a group of special forces of the US landed in the north of Afghanistan, and they started assisting the remnants of the Northern Alliance to rise up against the Taliban, which they did. And also to the south, the special forces mobilized Hamid Karzai, and some of the special forces traveled along with him to Uruzgan. And when Taliban came to take him, to arrest him, the special forces resisted, and then the special forces helicopters extracted him and took him to an unknown location, maybe somewhere in Pakistan. The other leader was Commander Abdul Haq, who hailed from southeastern Afghanistan. He was also mobilized in Peshawar to move in and mobilize the southeastern Pashtun tribes against Taliban. He was not accompanied by any American special forces, but he was given a special satellite phone. And when he came under attack, he tried to use the phone, but it didn't work. And he was caught and killed by the Taliban. So Hamid Karzai was left as the only Pashtun choice.
وذلك لأن الولايات المتحدة والأمم المتحدة كانتا مصرتين على أن يكون الزعيم الأفغاني الجديد من البشتون. ما السبب الذي أعطوه لذلك؟
That was a bit later. The U.S. instructed its team led by James Dobbins, Ambassador James Dobbins, and Ambassador Khalilzad was also part of his team. And the UN Secretary General appointed Ambassador Lakhdar Ibrahimi to hold a meeting of Afghan leaders in Bonn, in Germany, to decide on a successor arrangement after Taliban's collapse. And in that proceedings, I was present, but I was part of the civil society meeting, not the political leaders meeting, but we knew what was going on in each of those meetings. Now, in the political leaders meeting, there was 4 main factions. One was led by ex-King Zahir Shah, and Hamid Karzai was supposedly part of his team. The other was the Northern Alliance team, and the third one was the Peshawar team, which was headed by Pir Hamid Gailani, and the fourth one was called the Cyprus group, which partly included Gulbuddin Hekmatyar's people. Now the 4 groups came together. They were all together around 25 leaders. and they were supposed to decide on a leader to succeed Mullah Omar. Now there were other candidates. Apparently King Zahir Shah nominated Sattar Sirat, who was his minister in 1970s and 60s. He nominated him to chair the new administration. It was not presidency or prime ministership. It was chairmanship of the new administration. Now his nominee was rejected by the US and the UN officials, saying that the successor to Mullah Omar should be a Pashtun and should be from Kandahar. So they retried the whole process. And that's how Hamid Karzai came to the top. But then, if you allow me, I have heard recently another version that was going on in the background, not in the front, that some European countries wanted the kingdom, the monarchy to return back to Afghanistan, monarchical system. And Americans and Iranians were interestingly against the monarchical. Americans for their own reason, and Iranians didn't want in their neighborhood for a king to return back. So it may have had a dominoes impact on them. Now, ultimately, Americans prevailed, and they went for presidential system, starting with Hamid Karzai as chairman of the administration, and then agreed on a 4-year roadmap. And that roadmap included like 6 months, Hamid Karzai as chairman of interim administration, then a Loya Jirga, a Grand Assembly, that would endorse a new president for 18 months, and then after that approval of constitution, and then elections, and then the process will go on. That was the roadmap. So they agreed on Hamid Karzai because he was a Pashtun from Kandahar, and perhaps because he was known to Americans more than anybody else.
وهذا ما قصدته بأحد أسئلتي السابقة لأعرف أكثر عنك. متى بدأت علاقة كرزاي بالأمريكيين؟ لأن البعض يصفه برجل الأمريكيين في أفغانستان. أستمع إلى الإجابة بعد الفاصل لو تكرمت. شكرا لوجودك معنا مجددا. مشاهدينا الكرام، فاصل قصير قبل أن نتابع ما لدينا في هذه الحلقة.
When Rabbani saw that the Shura Nizar, which is his force, is against him, and they want Karzai to replace him, then he vacated the seat.
أهلا بكم مجددا مشاهدينا الكرام إلى هذه الحلقة من الذاكرة السياسية، نتابع فيها مع محمد عمر داوودزي وزير الداخلية الأفغاني الأسبق. أهلا بكم معنا معالي الوزير مجددا. كنت أردت أن أسألك أكثر عن طبيعة العلاقة التي جمعت الأمريكيين بكرزاي قبل 2001. متى بدأت؟
When the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai was studying in Simla in India. Simla was the summer capital of the British Empire when they were ruling over India. So it's a very kind of Western culture there, and there's huge Western presence there. Now, after finishing Simla, he returned to Pakistan because Afghanistan was occupied by Soviet Union, and resistance groups were headquartered in Peshawar and in Quetta. His family, his father, lived in Quetta. He arrived in Quetta, and later on his father took him to Peshawar, introduced him to one of the Mujahideen leader, Professor Sabghatullah Mujahidi, and he started working with Professor Sabghatullah Mujahidi as his English language translator. And President Mujahidi obviously was having very close relationship with the US embassies and many other embassies in Islamabad. And Hamid Karzai says that this is when the first time he came into contact with the US embassy and with the US ambassador. But I have heard other stories, I cannot confirm it, that even when he was in Simla, he was in touch with Americans and other Western agencies who were looking for talents to go to Peshawar and lead the resistance against the Soviet Union.
لكنك ستسمع لاحقا من الجنرال إحسان الحق رئيس هيئة القوات المشتركة الباكستانية عن هذا الموضوع، وسيقول لك بأنه الاستخبارات الباكستانية رشحت أيضا كارزاي وأصرت عليه، ولكن لماذا؟
Yes, that I wouldn't know why, but in 2005, when Hamid Karzai was the president and I was his chief of staff, we traveled to Islamabad. And in a state dinner, I was sitting on the same table with General Ihsanul Haq. At that time, he was chairman, Joint Chief of Staff Committee, but he told me that in 2001, he was Director General of ISI. And the Lakhdar Brahimi sent him a delegation from Bonn asking him who would be the most suitable candidates. And General Ihsanul Haq said that he mentioned Hamid Karzai. And I asked him the question that why did you nominated him? He said, well, as Director General, I follow the rules of my agency. The agency told me to nominate him.
يعني الاستخبارات الباكستانية كانت تريد إرضاء الاستخبارات الأمريكية في هذا الترشيح لكرزاي؟
Could be. That's possible.
هل سألته عن عدم دعوة طالبان إلى مؤتمر بون؟
He also said that they should have been invited, and this is a shortcoming, this is a default. That's what he said. And my opinion also at that time was that we can come to that later, that Taliban should have been invited to the Bonn conference. And what I heard from my opposite side, the Americans, mainly, they said, Taliban no more. They don't exist, and if they exist, we will wipe them out. So there's no need for Taliban to be present. That was a mistake.
إذن كانت هذه الرغبة الأمريكية على حساب كما يقول بعض المصلحة الأفغانية لو حصلت منذ ذلك الحين ولم نصل إلى ما وصلنا إليه. عموما ما كانت مقاربتك في مؤتمر بون حول تشكيل الحكومة ولماذا اصطدمت بالأخضر الإبراهيمي وزلماي خليل زاد؟
Okay, there were two reasons. When they decided on the new administration, they came and they announced the decision from the civil society meeting, which I was chairing. And there, when they announced that Hamid Karzai will be the chairman, and then the entire cabinet were leaders of the war, I mean, Mujahideen leaders. And for two reasons, I raised objection. I said, first, that you had not invited Taliban, which you should have invited, because Taliban are the moment the biggest faction in the country. Which that was the reply I heard, that Taliban are no more. They are not going to exist. My second objection was that at this critical juncture, people of Afghanistan would accept any administration because they are fed up with the war between factions, including Taliban. Any new administration they would welcome, regardless of who the administration is and who is at the top. I said this was the opportunity that you should have agreed on a technocrat cabinet, on a cabinet that is led by educated Afghans. And Afghans would have accepted, and a new chapter would have begun in the life of the Afghan people.
هذا سيؤدي إلى معارضة الإبراهيمي لاحقا لك لتولي منصب في حكومة كرزاي. كيف حصل ذلك؟
Yes, when I joined President Karzai as his chief of staff, one day as a friend, he told me that I wanted to know why was Lakhdar Brahimi against you becoming my chief of staff. I said, I don't know, but this is what happened. I raised this objection. And I asked him how did he put it to you? He said, well, he put it like if you are against this administration, the President Karzai's administration. I said, no, I was not against this administration. I was pinpointing the faults in the process. And I mentioned to him that this was what I was insisting, that Taliban should have been invited and technocrat ministers. And Karzai said, well, I think you had a point. I said, well, yeah. But I think later on in the political life, there was one instance where Lakhdar Brahimi told me that you are right. We missed the opportunity.
كيف أقنع أمراء الحرب الكبار بالتنازل لكرزاي؟ رباني تقريبا نصب نفسه. كان هناك مشكلة مع إسماعيل خان أيضا. كيف أقنع هؤلاء القادة الكبار بالتنازل لصالح كرزاي؟
Various techniques. Like we have the Shorai Nizar group, the people from Panjshir, the leaders from the Panjshir Valley. They were very much supportive of Karzai, and they were very much supportive of Karzai replacing Rabbani. So they played a key role in convincing Rabbani. When Rabbani saw that the Shura-e-Nizar, which is his force, is against him and they want Karzai to replace him, then he vacated the seat. And also back in Bonn, they were one of the 4 major groups, the Shura-e-Nizar. So they had decided that Karzai should replace Rabbani. But in regard to Ismail Khan, I think there were 2 factors. Americans worked on him, and Iranians worked on him, because Iran also wanted Karzai to be the chairman and for that arrangement to work. I'm not saying Iran was supporting Americans, but coincidentally they were on the same line.
سأعود إلى هذه النقطة، ولكن لماذا فصيل رباني نفسه وقف ضده مع كرزاي عندما نتحدث عن شوراء نزار؟ كيف ذلك؟
Rabbani's main military force was Shura-e-Nizar, and Shura-e-Nizar was convinced that Karzai was the right choice, because none of them could become president. None of the leaders after Massoud's assassination were of that level to become president at that stage. And there was maybe rivalry between Jamiat and Shura-e-Nizar or whatever, that's among them. But Marshal Fahim Khan, vice president, many times I heard from him that he convinced Rabbani to vacate the seat for Karzai.
هل استخدمت الأموال والوعود بالمناصب إلى ما هنالك في هذه المحاولات لإقناعهم؟
Not by Shura-e-Nizar, but later on by Hamid Karzai, the president. He promised in 2004 elections, and even the Loya Jirga, the constitutional Loya Jirga, he asked for Rabbani's support, and he told him that when we have a parliament, then Karzai will support Rabbani to become the chairman of the parliament, which never happened.
ولكن كانت هناك أموال تتدفق إلى زعماء الشيوخ والقبائل وإلى بعض أمراء الحرب لإقناعهم بالسكوت عن كل ما يجري في المرحلة الجديدة، أليس كذلك؟
Yes, there were complications. That's why Professor Rabbani could not become chairman of the parliament. There were complications. Even if President Karzai wanted, he would not have been able to implement it.
نعم، ولكن سؤالي كان هل فعلا دفعت أموال وقدمت وعود بمناصب فقط من أجل شراء سكوت شخصيات معينة؟
Not at the level of Rabbani. He was never paid. But yes, certainly in the Loya Jirga, outside Loya Jirga, in those first few years, a lot of money was floating around and were being paid by the Afghan government and by international community. And not only money, contracts were given to certain people to support the administration.
هل كانت هذه سياسة حكيمة؟
Not really, no. It was laying down the seeds of corruption.
عظيم. أريد أن أعود إلى نقطة إيران أمريكا. قلت أنه بالصدفة توافقا على يعني حامد كرزاي رئيسا. يعني إذا قلنا بأنه حامد كرزاي يتواصل مع الأمريكيين من قبل 2001 منذ كان في الهند كما تفضلت، ما السبب الإيراني؟
Before the 9/11, Karzai made at least one visit to Iran, maybe 2, to meet with the Afghan Shiite leaders in Iran. And he developed a good relationship with Iran. And then Iranians, not only for Karzai, if you read the writings of Jawad Zarif in some of his interviews, he says that he advised the Shura-e-Nizar to accept the deal. And his words were that you cannot find a better deal than this one. Karzai is the right person, so go for it. That's what Jawad Zarif confessed, that he had a role. And Jawad Zarif was, I think, the leader of the Iranian team in the Bonn Agreement. But like I said earlier, Americans didn't want a return of monarchy to Afghanistan. And Iran didn't want return of monarchy. So there were incidentally a convergence of interest. Maybe it was temporary, but there was certainly a convergence of interest.
ولكن هل كرزاي رغم كل هذه الأسئلة التي نثيرها مع إجاباتها، هل كان كرزاي الحاكم الفعلي لأفغانستان؟
In the first few years, no. Karzai was one of the three presidents. And in fact, there were another two half presidents also. But let's put it this way. There were Karzai, there was Khalilzad, and there was Lakhdar Brahimi. They were the three co-presidents. And I saw when I became chief of staff to the president in 2003, I was witness to many instances where cabinet would decide and the next cabinet meeting would reverse that decision and everybody would know that Karzai had received a call either from Brahimi or from Khalilzad.
سؤال أخير، من هما نصفا الرئيسين الآخران؟
Well, the other two halves, there was NATO representative also. He also had a big say.
شكرا جزيلا لوجودك معنا في هذه الحلقة الأولى من الذاكرة السياسية معالي الوزير. نتابع وإياك في بداية الحلقة المقبلة. سيكون لدينا جزء مخصص للبودكاست في هذه الحلقة ولكن تلفزيونيا. ننهي الآن مشاهدينا الكرام، هكذا نختم هذه الحلقة ونتابع على بودكاست العربية. ملتقانا تلفزيونيا الأسبوع المقبل مع محمد عمر داوودزي وزير الداخلية الأفغاني الأسبق. أرجو أن تبقوا معنا.
And upon arrival in Camp David, in the first informal chat, President Bush asked President Karzai, said they were calling each other my brother. He said, my brother, do you want the Duran line? And Karzai was caught by surprise with that question. He thought a little bit and then he said, yes, I want it, but I know I can't get it.